Let me set the scene for you. My name is Ryan, and I'm 35. My wife, Emily, and I have been married for 10 years. 10 long years of what I thought was a solid, stable marriage. Sure, we had our arguments, but who doesn't? I figured we were like any other couple, two flawed people doing their best to make it work. I never once thought I'd be writing something like this. Our 10th wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration. We had planned a party at a local event hall, invited our closest friends and family, and even splurged a little on catering and decorations. I was excited. Emily had been the love of my life since college. I dreamed of starting a family with her, building a future together. But over the last year, things had started to feel off. First, it was small things. Emily suddenly became glued to her phone, texting late into the night. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd roll her eyes and say it was just work or a group chat with the girls. She started dressing up more, even on days when she was just running errands. Her once affectionate attitude toward me turned cold. She seemed irritated by everything I did, from the way I loaded the dishwasher to how I folded the laundry. The biggest red flag came a month before our anniversary. Emily started talking about a new friend she met at her gym, a guy named Chris. At first, I didn't think much of it. She's always been friendly and outgoing. But then, she began mentioning him more and more. Chris said this, or Chris recommended that. It was like he was living rent-free in her head. When I voiced my concerns, she laughed in my face. "You're being ridiculous, Ryan," she said. "Chris is just a friend. Stop being so insecure." Her tone wasn't one of reassurance, it was dismissive, like I was some paranoid fool. Looking back now, I feel stupid for brushing off the signs, for believing her lies, for thinking our marriage was unshakable. Because what happened on our anniversary shattered every illusion I had about us. The day of our anniversary arrived, and I was determined to make it special. I'd spent weeks planning every detail of the celebration. I even bought Emily a necklace she'd been eyeing for months. A delicate gold chain with a small heart-shaped pendant. I wanted her to know that, despite our recent rough patch, I still loved her deeply. As guests started to arrive, I noticed Emily was unusually radiant. She wore a red dress I'd never seen before, one that hugged her figure in a way that made heads turn. She looked stunning, but there was something about the way she carried herself that unsettled me. Her smile was wide, but it didn't reach her eyes. Throughout the evening, I watched as Emily flitted from one group to another, laughing louder than usual and tossing her hair like she was auditioning for a rom-com. It wasn't her usual style, but I chalked it up to her wanting to impress our friends. That's when I saw him, Chris. He walked in late, dressed in a sharp suit, with a smug grin plastered on his face. Emily's face lit up the moment she spotted him. She practically sprinted across the room to greet him, throwing her arms around his neck in a way that made my stomach churn. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that it was all in my head. But as the night went on, their behavior became harder to ignore. They whispered in each other's ears, laughed at private jokes, and shared lingering glances that left little to the imagination. The final straw came when the music started, and Emily pulled Chris onto the dance floor. They moved in sync, their bodies far too close for comfort. She was smiling like a lovesick teenager, completely ignoring me and everyone else in the room. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched my wife dance with another man. On our anniversary, no less. I was too stunned to act at first, but then, as if to twist the knife deeper, Emily glanced my way. Her smile turned icy, and she leaned in to whisper something to Chris. Whatever she said made him laugh. She then looked directly at me and mouthed the words, "Jealous fool." That was it. My blood boiled as the realization hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just being disrespectful. She was flaunting her betrayal in front of everyone. I needed answers, but I didn't want to cause a scene. Yet, I stepped out of the hall to gather my thoughts and figure out my next move. That's when I noticed Emily's purse sitting on a nearby table. Curiosity got the better of me and I opened it. Inside, I found her phone. Her messages were locked, but one notification caught my eye. A recent text from Chris. "Can't wait for later tonight. You were amazing earlier." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Amazing earlier? What did that mean? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more infuriating than the last. I knew then that this wasn't just an emotional affair. There was no denying it anymore. I put the phone back, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and devastation. I had the evidence I needed, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to make sure she couldn't worm her way out of this with more lies. Little did I know the worst was yet to come. I couldn't take it anymore. My mind was spinning, my stomach churning. Every time I glanced back into the hall and saw Emily laughing with Chris, my rage bubbled closer to the surface. But I knew I had to keep my cool, at least for now. The party was winding down and people were starting to leave. Emily was still glued to Chris's side, and the way she hung on him made me sick. As the last few guests trickled out, I finally decided it was time. I wasn't going to wait another second. When the room was nearly empty, I walked up to Emily and Chris, my jaw tight. "Emily, can we talk?" I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. She barely glanced at me. "Not now, Ryan. I'm talking to Chris." I clenched my fists. "No, now. We need to talk. Alone." Chris smirked, like he thought the whole thing was a joke. "Hey man, take it easy. We're just friends." I ignored him, my eyes locked on Emily. "Outside. Now." Emily rolled her eyes dramatically and muttered something under her breath, but she followed me out into the parking lot. The cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, but it did nothing to cool the fire in my chest. "What the hell is going on, Emily?" I demanded. "What are you doing with him? On our anniversary?" She crossed her arms and tilted her head, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Ryan. Chris and I are just friends. You're making a fool of yourself." I laughed bitterly. "Friends? That's what you're going with? Because I saw the way you were looking at him tonight. I saw the way you danced with him, like I didn't even exist." Her expression hardened. "You're so insecure. Do you even hear yourself? You're embarrassing." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot I'd taken of Chris's text. Her face froze for a split second, but she quickly recovered, her lips curling into a sneer. "You went through my phone? That's low, even for you. Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "What does this text mean? You were amazing earlier? Amazing at what, Emily? Explain it to me." She rolled her eyes again, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, grow up, Ryan. Chris and I were just joking around. You're reading way too much into this." I could feel the anger rising in my throat. "Joking around? You've been lying to me for months, haven't you? Sneaking around behind my back, disrespecting me in front of everyone. What kind of person does that?" Her face twisted into a snarl. "You want to know what kind of person? Someone who's tired of being married to a boring, jealous control freak. Someone who deserves to have a little fun for once." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, wondering how we had ended up here. Before I could respond, she stormed back inside, slamming the door behind her. I was left alone in the parking lot, the cold seeping into my bones. I knew one thing for sure. Emily wasn't going to admit anything willingly. If I wanted the truth, I was going to have to dig deeper, and I was more than ready to get my hands dirty. The ride home was suffocating. Emily refused to speak, her arms crossed as she stared out the window like I was the villain in all of this. The tension was so thick it felt like the car might implode. As soon as we pulled into the driveway, she slammed the door and marched inside without a word. I followed her, determined not to let her slither away from this. "Emily, we're not done," I said, my voice steady but firm. She spun around, her face contorted with anger. "You're unbelievable, Ryan, ruining our anniversary with your paranoid crap. Can't you just let it go?" I stepped closer, holding my ground. "Let it go? Let it go. Emily, you danced with another man in front of all our friends and family. You called me a jealous fool to my face. And that text, what am I supposed to think? That this is normal? That I'm crazy?" She laughed bitterly, a cruel edge to her tone. "Maybe you are crazy. You've been suffocating me for years, Ryan. always watching, always questioning. I can't live like this anymore. Her deflection only fueled my determination. So, you admit it then? You've been sneaking around with Chris. She didn't answer. Instead, she rolled her eyes and stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood in the living room, seething. My mind raced with questions and suspicions. I knew I wasn't going to get the truth out of her. Not tonight, anyway. If she wasn't going to tell me what was going on, I'd find out on my own. The next morning, Emily left early, claiming she had errands to run. I knew better than to believe her. As soon as she was gone, I started searching. I went through her emails, her social media, her drawers, anything that might give me answers. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. In her closet, tucked behind a pile of old sweaters, was a small, red envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. Emily, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I'll be counting the hours until I see you again. Chris. I stared at the note, my blood boiling. Last night? Incredible? The pieces started to fall into place. The late-night texts, the sudden gym membership, the phone calls she'd take outside. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was doing it blatantly, almost daring me to find out. I took a picture of the note as evidence and put it back exactly where I found it. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I needed a plan. If she thought she could play me for a fool, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. That evening, Emily came home, acting as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, something she hadn't done in months, and asked what I wanted for dinner. The audacity of her fake normalcy made my skin crawl, but I played along. Actually, I said, keeping my tone light, why don't we go out tomorrow night? Just the two of us. It's been a while since we had a date night. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, but then she smiled. Sure, Ryan. That sounds nice. Little did she know I wasn't planning a romantic evening. I was setting the stage for her world to come crashing down. The next day, I could barely focus at work. My mind raced with everything I'd uncovered and what I was about to do. Emily thought she was in control, that she could manipulate and gaslight me without consequence. But she was wrong. When I got home, Emily was already dressed for our date night. She wore a sleek black dress, her hair done in loose waves. She looked stunning, as always, but now I saw right through her polished exterior. I saw the lies, the betrayal, the selfishness. You clean up nice, she said with a smirk, as if she wasn't planning to stab me in the back again the first chance she got. Thanks, I said, forcing a smile. Let's make tonight special. We headed to a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place we used to go when we were first dating. I pulled out all the stops, ordering her favorite wine and pretending to hang on her every word. She seemed relaxed, even happy, as if the tension from the previous night had evaporated. After dinner, I suggested we go to a bar nearby for drinks. It was a place she'd mentioned Chris liked to frequent, a detail she'd let slip during one of her many glowing anecdotes about him. I'd done my research and knew there was a good chance he'd be there. As we walked in, Emily hesitated. Her eyes darted around the room, and I could tell she was looking for someone. It didn't take long for her to find him. Chris was at the bar, chatting with a couple of guys, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I guided Emily to a table near the back, but her attention kept drifting toward Chris. She was fidgety, distracted, and her attempts to act normal were pathetic at best. I need to use the restroom, she said after a few minutes, grabbing her clutch and heading toward the back of the bar. I watched her like a hawk. She didn't go to the restroom. Instead, she veered off and made a beeline for Chris. The two of them stepped outside, and I followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. As I crept closer, I could hear their conversation. What are you doing here? Chris asked, his tone low but amused. Ryan wanted to come here, she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I didn't know you'd be here. Chris chuckled. Well, this is a nice surprise. You look amazing. Her voice softened, almost coquettish. Thanks. I missed you. My hands clenched into fists as I watched her lean in, whispering something I couldn't make out. Chris grinned and placed his hand on her waist, pulling her closer. I had seen enough. I stepped out of the shadows and cleared my throat. Emily jumped back like she'd been caught stealing, her face pale as a ghost. "Ryan," she stammered, trying to compose herself. "Don't stop on my account," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is exactly the kind of entertainment I came here for." Chris straightened up, his smug expression faltering. "Look, man, I think you're misunderstanding." I cut him off. "Oh, I understand perfectly. You've been screwing my wife behind my back. I just didn't realize you were dumb enough to do it in public." Emily started babbling excuses, her words a jumbled mess. "Ryan, it's not what it looks like. I was just—" "Save it," I snapped, pulling out my phone. "I've got screenshots, I've got your little love note, and now I've got this." "You're done, Emily. You can't lie your way out of this one." Her face twisted with anger. "You're such a pathetic, controlling jerk. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." Chris tried to step in, but I held up a hand. "Don't even think about it, buddy. You're just as much of a snake as she is. Stay out of this." I turned back to Emily, my voice cold. "You're going to regret every single lie you told, every moment you thought you could walk all over me. I'm done playing nice." With that, I walked away, leaving her and her lover standing there in stunned silence. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. As I drove home that night, my mind was clear for the first time in weeks. Emily and Chris thought they could humiliate me, lie to me, and get away with it. They underestimated me. This wasn't going to end with a confrontation in a bar parking lot. It was time to hit them where it hurt. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I explained everything, from Emily's behavior to the evidence I'd gathered. He assured me I had a strong case for divorce and advised me to start securing my finances. I didn't waste any time. By lunch, I'd moved half of our joint savings into an account under my name, canceled the credit cards Emily used, and even froze her access to my work benefits. But financial moves weren't enough. Emily had humiliated me publicly, and I wanted her to feel that same sting of betrayal. I spent the afternoon calling a few of our closest friends, carefully weaving the story of what had happened. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. There was no need. The truth was damning enough. By the time I was done, word of Emily's affair was spreading like wildfire. That evening, I sent Emily a text, telling her not to come home. I wanted her out of my house that I had paid for while she gallivanted around with Chris. When she replied with a string of angry messages, accusing me of being petty and cruel, I didn't respond. Instead, I made my final move. I'd been holding on to something for weeks. A video from a party 2 months ago. It was footage of Emily and Chris flirting shamelessly while they thought no one was watching. I hadn't paid much attention to it at the time, but now it was gold. I uploaded the clip to a private group chat with some mutual friends, captioned it with, "Here's the happy couple," in case anyone was wondering why I'm filing for divorce, and hit send. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The next morning, Emily showed up at the house, pounding on the door. I let her in, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook. "How could you air our dirty laundry like that?" she shrieked, her face red with fury. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me?" I laughed bitterly. "Oh, you're humiliated? That's rich. Do you think I wasn't humiliated when you danced with your lover at our anniversary party? When you called me a jealous fool in front of everyone we know?" She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "You made your bed, Emily. Now you get to lie in it. Don't you dare try to play the victim here." Her anger turned to desperation. "Ryan, please. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can work through it. We've been together for so long. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Her sudden shift in tone only made me angrier. "You didn't just make a mistake, Emily. You made a choice. Over and over again. And now you want to act like I'm the bad guy? No, this is on you." She broke down, crying and pleading, but I was done. I handed her a folder with the divorce papers and told her she had a week to move out. As for Chris, well, let's just say karma hit him hard. One of the mutual friends I'd shared the video with happened to know his boss. Turns out, Chris had been lying about his relationship status at work to avoid violating company policies. A quick phone call later, he was out of a job. Emily and Chris had destroyed my trust and my marriage, but they'd underestimated my ability to fight back. After Emily stormed out that morning, clutching the divorce papers in her trembling hands, I finally felt a small sense of relief. It wasn't satisfaction, far from it, but it was the first step toward reclaiming my life. I sat down in the now empty house, looking around at the remnants of a marriage that had crumbled into dust. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach full speed. By the end of the week, Emily's friends, at least the ones who still dared to talk to her, had started calling me to hear my side of the story. Apparently, Emily had tried spinning her own narrative, claiming I was a controlling husband who pushed her into Chris's arms. Luckily, the evidence I'd shared was already working its magic. Nobody believed her lies, not after the texts, the note, and the footage of her cozying up to Chris. The people who mattered, our real friends, rallied behind me. One night, I got a call from her sister, Megan. She was furious. Not at me, but at Emily. "Ryan, I can't believe she did this to you," Megan said, her voice shaking with anger. "I always thought she was selfish, but this is something else. Just know I'm on your side, whatever you need." Hearing that from Megan, who had always been closer to Emily, felt oddly vindicating. Emily had burned so many bridges that even her own family was starting to distance themselves. But Emily wasn't going down quietly. A few days after I filed for divorce, I came home to find her sitting on the porch, her face streaked with mascara. She was holding a bottle of wine and a half-empty glass, looking like a scene from a bad soap opera. "Ryan," she slurred, "can't we just talk? Please." I sighed and folded my arms. "What do you want, Emily?" She stumbled to her feet, nearly dropping the glass. I made a mistake, okay? I was lonely and Chris was there and, I don't know. I didn't mean to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't mean to hurt me? Emily, you danced with him in front of everyone. You flaunted your affair like it was some kind of joke. Don't stand here and act like you didn't know exactly what you were doing." Her face twisted into a grimace. "Well, maybe if you'd paid more attention to me." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You don't get to blame me for your choices. I was there. I was always there. You're the one who decided I wasn't enough. So don't stand here and try to rewrite history." She glared at me, her anger flaring up again. "Fine," she spat. "Be a self-righteous jerk. But don't act like you're some kind of saint. You think ruining my reputation makes you better than me?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Emily, you ruined your own reputation. I just made sure the truth came out." She threw the glass onto the porch, shattering it into 1,000 pieces, and stormed off into the night. The neighbors must have been watching, because the next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from Mrs. Peterson, the sweet old lady who lived next door. "Good for you, Ryan," it read. "You deserve better." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. As for Chris, he was dealing with his own problems. Losing his job had been just the beginning. Word spread quickly in his social circles about what had happened, and he found himself ostracized by people who once considered him a friend. His name became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when you cross the wrong person. Emily moved in with her parents temporarily, though I heard through the grapevine that even they were struggling to deal with her antics. She'd burned too many bridges, and now she was left with nothing but the mess she'd created. I, on the other hand, was starting to rebuild. Slowly but surely, I was piecing my life back together. The silence in the house was deafening at first. It was strange not having Emily around, even if the memories of her betrayal still lingered in every corner. For the first few days after she left, I found myself pacing the empty rooms, unsure of what to do next. The woman I'd spent a decade with was gone, and the life we'd built together felt like a hollow shell. But then, something shifted. I woke up one morning and realized I didn't feel the same weight pressing on my chest. It wasn't a full release, not yet, But it was a start. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. I joined a local hiking group, something I'd always wanted to do but never got around to because Emily would roll her eyes and say, "That's such a waste of time." I reconnected with old friends, people Emily had pushed out of my life with her constant need for control. One evening, while going through some old boxes in the garage, I found a journal I'd kept during the early years of our marriage. Flipping through the pages, I was reminded of the man I used to be, hopeful, driven, and full of dreams about starting a family. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that version of myself, sacrificing pieces of who I was to try and keep Emily happy. I wasn't going to let that happen again. I threw myself into work, landing a big promotion that came with a corner office and a hefty raise. It felt good to pour my energy into something productive, something that was entirely mine. I also started going to therapy, which admittedly was something I'd scoffed at in the past. But talking to someone about the pain, the anger, and the betrayal helped me process it all in ways I never thought possible. Emily, meanwhile, wasn't faring so well. Mutual friends told me she was struggling to find her footing. Her parents had grown tired of her tantrums and excuses, and Chris, unsurprisingly, had dropped her the moment his life started falling apart. She was left alone, trying to salvage the pieces of her broken reputation. One day she called me. "Ryan," she said, her voice shaky. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you." I hesitated, unsure of what she could possibly have left to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop the next day. When I walked in, she was already sitting at a table, her face pale and drawn. She looked nothing like the confident, manipulative woman who had danced with her lover on our anniversary. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly as I sat down. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but distant. She fidgeted with her cup, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know I regret it. I never meant for things to end like this." Her words sounded rehearsed, hollow. I wasn't sure if she truly regretted her actions or just regretted the consequences. "Emily," I said, leaning forward slightly, "I've already made my peace with what happened. You made your choices and I've made mine. I'm moving on. I think it's time you did the same." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the need to comfort her. I stood up, paid for my coffee, and walked out without looking back. That moment felt like the final chapter of a book I'd been desperate to finish. Walking out of that coffee shop felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life.